Here we go. So today we're talking about sockets. Anyone know what sockets are? Or what makes them kind of nifty, neat? Yes, Stevie.
Connection to a database that's continuous.
Okay.
It's like a...
Is it
not a
necessarily a
request.
connection to a database?
Or to a server.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's just, it never stops. It don't stop.
Don't stop.
It won't
Yeah.
stop.
Okay.
Can't stop, won't stop.
Yeah. So the way in which this differs from the traditional model that we've been working with thus far is that traditionally what would happen is that a client, a browser, would make a request to the server would send back some information, right? And then we talked a little bit last week about how to do AJAX requests, so it's not just us landing on a page and making a GET request. Sometimes we may make some requests through JavaScript as well. The difference here, though, is that we establish this two-way connection between the server and the client that can persist. So it's just a continuous connection. It's as if we picked up the phone when the person lands on our page, and we don't hang it up until they leave. Okay? So that enables us to do some pretty neat things. What might we be able to do with sockets? Any ideas for implementations for this?
It's like real time.
Real
Stuff like tickets, stuff like
Yeah. That's actually a really good idea because with tickets, we kind of want to know what's available at any given point in time. Because if someone snatches up those tickets you were trying to buy, well, you want to know that. You want to know that you can't get them anymore. Another good possible idea for something with sockets might be an auction type site. So when you're on eBay, as people are bidding on an item, do you need to constantly refresh the page to see what the current bid is? Do you?
Yeah. Yes.
Is that really the case?
Oh
that.
yeah.
Yeah, actually, yeah.
You just hammer away.
There is
Jesus.
a Java.
Yeah.
Unless you're a sniper at the end.
Wow.
You can download software that does it for you and snipes it for you. And that's like
eBay is
the law.
using Java.
Just adds one cent. Yeah.
Well, so Java should still have some sockets implementation because most of the languages do. Obviously we're in JavaScript right now, so we're going to be doing sockets in JavaScript, but you can also do sockets in Python. I believe you can do them in PHP. You should be able to do them in other languages as well. So each language will have its own implementation. JavaScript has WebSockets, and the one that we're going to use is called socket.io, which is an implementation of sockets. So it's not the only way to use sockets in JavaScript. There are other libraries as well. So if I go on NPM, for instance, we were exploring this the other day, and you just type in sockets. Let's see if we have some different libraries. So sockets, AG sockets, which you can see is for communication via WebSockets. Redux sockets. Oh, Jesus. Sorry about that. Then we've got a Koa WebSocket. So there are all kinds of different things. Interestingly enough, socket.io is not even top of this list, right? If I do socket, here's socket.io. Cool. So we're going to be using socket.io. Let's start to get a little basic implementation of this just so that we see how it works. So I've got a empty folder where I'm going to create a new project. What do I want to do when I'm starting a new project? What? I heard some different things, yeah. Let's do npm init. And then -y to just get some defaults. Good. Okay. What else do I want to do?
Express and EJS.
Yeah. Do we need EJS though? Not necessarily. Yeah, he's like, man, maybe not. Not in this case. I'm not going to use EJS because I'm not really doing any dynamic templating. Doesn't mean that you can't use it, but I'm not going to use it. So we need Express, and what else are we going to need? We need socket itself, right? Because this is a socket demo. So let's go npm I, and then we'll say express socket.io. Good deal. And while we're waiting for that, I'm just going to create a very basic HTML page. So we'll just say, whoops, index.html, drop in some boilerplate.
Hey Morley,
Yeah,
did you just install both of them at the same time?
yeah. Not bad, right?
Sick,
Yeah, pretty cool. We can install multiple packages in one fell swoop. Yeah. Yes, Tom.
Hey, I think in survey, and this explains why EGS wasn't working for me, the EGS page wasn't working for the survey one, the redo. I think the platform actually tells us to do as a .ejs instead of an HTML. So I think in that case, I need to install that, right?
Yes.
But in
Yeah, if you
HTML
that's
will
correct.
still
If
work.
you are using EJS, you do need to install it.
Okay,
Right.
that's what I missed.
Yep.
All right, thank you.
Absolutely, no problem. Okay, so we've got some basic HTML. Let's just drop something in here. Let's say h1 sockets demo. All right, and then underneath that, I'm just going to have a script tag because we're going to have some JavaScript happening here. Just save that for now. What I want to do is create a very basic server. So let's create a server.js. Okay, and what do I need to do when I'm creating an Express server? Let's require it. Very good. Express equals require Express. Excellent. What else do I need to do with it? Yeah, let's create an actual app by invoking the Express function. All right, and then lastly, I usually need to just listen, right? However, we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to save a reference to the listening itself, and then we're going to use that along with sockets. Okay? So I'll say something like const server equals app.listen, listen at 3000. Okay, and then I also want to have a couple routes here. I want to have a single route for my index, so this is just going to be my main page, and then I also want to be able to handle a request for socket itself. Okay, so there are a couple different ways you guys can use sockets. You can use the CDN. Does anyone use the CDN word? One person? Well,
On the EJS, I used the CDN on my EJS file.
oh, you did?
The client
Okay. Yeah. So a CDN, for those of you who haven't heard that term before, that just means content delivery network. So a lot of times with different JavaScript files, you can find that they're hosted somewhere already, and you could just bring that into your template and use it that way. We're going to use the version that we installed with npm, just because we like doing that. So let's do app.get. So if I hit my index route, I need to pass it a callback function, right? And I'm going to do this a little bit differently than we've been doing. I'm going to use what's called a fat arrow function, and this is ES6 syntax. So that function again takes in all the same stuff that we're used to, the request and the response. And then with the response, I'm just going to do a send file. And what file am I going to send? Index.html. So to get a reference to that, I'm just going to go dir name, which is the current directory that we're in, plus index.html. Okay, so let's test this out real quick. So if I go nodemon server.js, should be listening at 3000. Okay, sockets demo, and I'm hearing huge yawns. We're already letting you guys down here with the excitement level. All right. So that's kind of cool. We're just sending back a file, just an HTML file. All right. Now let's actually create a route where we can get socket itself. You guys might have noticed that sometimes these parameters go a light color in VS Code. Do you know what that means?
You haven't used it.
It means we haven't used it. Yeah. So sometimes I like to just stick a underscore in there, and for some reason that doesn't go light colored. So that's cool. All right. So let's just create a path for socket itself. So I'll just say app.get. If the route is /socket.js, then again, I'm going to have an underscore and a response. Now, I still want to send a file, but where's the file that I want to send? I'm going to move this. It's inside node modules. Yeah, exactly. So let's go in here. And a lot of stuff is in here, but we do have over here socket.io-client. And this should have the actual file that I need for the front end of the website. Okay? So the path is going to be socket.io-client. Then we're going to go into the dist folder, and then socket.io.js. All right? So let's go dunder name, and then I'm going to add node modules socket.io-client. Then I need to go dist socket.io.js.
Meanwhile, just to save some people time, when you guys get into this, I'm a little bit ahead. Watch that path right there, because I think in the platform, the example they have, I don't think they had node underscore modules. I think they had something else. I don't think they had the dash client at the end of socket.io. I'm pretty sure it was different. And that was something that was actually in your video back in July.
Oh, cool.
That part one. So it's not a problem for everybody. Be careful with that.
All right.
The platform they use CDN.
I believe that's true. Yeah. Exactly. So,
But in one of the examples where you can like copy and paste if you're trying to figure it out, I think that the path is still lost.
okay, fair enough. Yeah, so if you run into trouble with it, as Tom said, just make sure that path name is right, and you want to be using the socket.io-client, not the socket.io, because if you use the socket.io, you're probably going to get some kind of an error like require is undefined or something like that, because it's using require, which of course is something that Node can handle, but your front-end JavaScript won't be able to understand. Okay, so let's just include this in our HTML and make sure that we don't get any kind of a 404 error. So say script source equals socket.io. Actually, it's just socket.js, I think was the path I said. And let me change one thing here. So we're using NodeMon, but I also want to watch for changes to my HTML. So I can say -e, and then we could say HTML, JS, what the heck? JS, and then that's it. Okay, so we're just going to watch for changes to HTML as well, because I want that to cause a server reload. And then let's see if our page is correctly loading this. So if I open up this guy and check my network tab, let me bring this up somehow. Okay, so we're successfully loading this, and if we preview it, you can see that our socket script is there, so we're all good to go, right? All right, let me bring this back down. Okay, so there are two sides to the whole socket equation. We've got this client-side script that we're going to work on, which will handle communicating to the server, with the server, and then we also have some code on the back end that's going to handle anything that's coming from the client side. All right, so let's get the back end ready to go. So here I saved a reference to my server, and what I want to do is I'm going to say const io equals the result of requiring socket.io, which again in terms of our node modules is going to require this folder right here, and then if you look inside the package.json, where's the main? So notice where package.json is actually telling it to look here for the main file. So if we require socket.io, what it's really requiring is this live folder and then the index file that's inside that. Okay. So we're requiring that, and then we are going to invoke the function that is returned from that against the server that we've saved a reference to. Okay. So let's say against the server. And then I want to have some code that can actually handle when a client connects to my server. Let's just do something. Maybe we'll log something out. We'll say somebody connected. I'll probably also keep a count of how many users I have just for fun. So let's just create a reference here. We'll say let count equals 0. And this is just saying at this point I have 0 users, right? I haven't had any connections yet. So now we're going to go io.on, and then we can listen to specific things. I want to listen for a connection event. Okay, so when a connection is made, I'm going to get a reference to, notice here it's telling me I need to then create a function which will get a reference to a socket. Okay, so I'll create another fat arrow function here. I'll just say socket, and then for now, whoops, what did I do? For now, let's just log out the socket information. So we'll go console.log socket, and then the other thing I want to do is I want to add to my count. So we'll say count plus plus. And then also, yeah, I guess that's about it, right? So we'll just add to our count, and then we'll console log all the information about that socket. It's just for fun. Okay, what's the other side of the equation? Did someone say server? Client side. We already did the server. I mean, this is just like a very basic thing. There's not much going on, but we also need to do the client side. So I'm going to come back over here to my index.html. And then here, what we're going to do is we're going to say const socket equals the result of invoking this function called IO. IO, where's that coming from, guys?
Created it in the server.
No. Where are we getting this IO right here on the client side?
Our script up top.
Yeah, up top we were actually loading in that script, right? So that's where that's coming from. So we get a reference to IO from the script that we loaded up top. And then we're going to say socket dot, let's emit something to the server. So we'll just emit an event called hello. And then I can also pass some data with the event. So I'm just going to pass another string, world. All right? Pretty fun stuff. World. Okay. Cool. So we're creating this socket by invoking IO, and then we're just emitting an event back to the server. So we're saying to the server, I have this event called hello that I'm emitting to you, and I'm also passing a string along with that. Now, this data here can be other data types as well. Have you guys passed other things in here? You socket guys? Yeah. So you can also pass objects if it's a more complex data that you want to pass along. All right. So let's try to refresh this page and see what happens. Okay. And if I go back to my server code here, let's see what's going on. So I've logged my socket, and this is a huge object, right? It's kind of like what happened when we were logging Express or the request object, something like that, a really long object. So now let's also change this a little bit. Let's say console log something like we have, and then I'll just tack on the count users. This. Okay, so let's make it super exciting. We have 1 users, right? Okay. Now let's also create. I wanted to create another incognito window, and the reason why I want to do this is because I don't want us to be using the same socket connection. If we're in the same browser and in the same window too, you won't really be able to get any kind of differentiation, right? So let's create another incognito window. I'll just go localhost 3000 again. Sockets demo, let's see what happens. So now we have 2 users. Let's do one other thing. I want to listen for a disconnection event in here, because if I want to keep track of my users, well, I need to subtract them as they leave, right? So let's say socket.on. I think it's disconnection. Have you guys looked this up yet?
Yeah, it's disconnection.
Disconnection. All right. Cool. So if we say disconnection, then what I want to do is I'm just going to pass in this little anonymous function. That might look a little bit weird to you guys, but basically if I have created a function that's not going to have any arguments to it, I can just create the empty parentheses like that. And then here we're just going to say someone left. And then maybe I'll make like a sad face or something. They didn't like us for some reason. All right, and then let's subtract from our count. So then we'll also console log we have count users left. Okay, so we still have 2 users. Let's test our disconnection event here. So if I go like this, drop that out, then it won't work. Let's try this again. So if I connect again, 3000. Uh-oh, we have 3 users.
Is it disconnect instead of disconnection?
Yeah, now I'm wondering, because that didn't seem to... Disconnection. Oh, it's disconnect. Sorry about that, guys. Alright, so let's change this to disconnect. Okay, and then I'll just, let's try it again and see if we can get this to disappear. So if I go like that, cool. Someone left, we have our sad face, and then we have 1 user's left. I know the grammar's not great, but it is what it is. We could create like a little pluralizing function if we wanted, but I'm not going to bother with that. Okay. So we're in pretty good shape now. The only thing is we're not really handling events. We haven't really handled receiving any events from the client yet. Now remember, the client was emitting an event right away. We emitted this hello world event. So let's actually create some handling where we can listen for that. So inside of our socket connection, let's say socket.on, and then we're listening for the hello event, and then that hello event is going to take some, I'm just going to call it stir because I know it's a string, and I'm just going to console.log stir. Or if I wanted to get super fancy, I can just put in console.log. Does that make sense why this would work as well? This is a callback function, right? Okay, so what does it mean when I pass in console.log? Yeah, it would actually take, so if that callback function happened to take more than 1 argument, or more than 1 parameter, it would actually console log all of them. But in this case, we only have 1 thing that's being passed along, right? So let's do this. And then we'll go back to our other connection here, or our original connection. So if I refresh this page, There we go. We actually have our console log down here because we sent along that original hello event. Right? Okay. Now the server, so this is how we send events in the client. We just simply emit. That's it. Can the client talk to other clients? No, not directly, right? Say that again?
Through the server they can.
Through the server, yeah. So the way the flow works is that this particular client is not going to be talking to the next guy. But what happens is when I emit, as a client, when I emit an event back to the server can then emit an event to all the sockets if I want. Right? So let's practice that a little bit. So when the server gets a new connection, we are adding to our count and we kind of logged some stuff out. But let's actually emit something to all the other sockets. Does anybody know how we do that? That's broadcast, right? So yeah, and this is a good point because there are a couple different ways that we can reach large numbers of users. One is by doing a broadcast.emit, and what the broadcast.emit does is it sends something to everyone except this specific socket right here. Okay, but if we do io.emit, that will send something to all of them, all the sockets. Okay. So that's the little small distinction there. So if we do a broadcast.emit, that's going to emit again to everyone except this particular socket. So we'll say new user is the name of the event, and then we'll just pass in a string saying yeah. All right. So then on my client side, I need to actually do something when I get this type of event, right? So what I want to do is I want to listen for a new user event, and then I'm just going to console log new user, a new user has joined. Okay. All right, so let's test this out. So here, I'm going to have my console here, and then if I refresh this, notice how nothing's happened yet. Why am I not seeing anything here? Yeah, because we're doing the broadcast.emit, we're actually sending that event to all the other sockets, just not this specific one, right? So if I open up that incognito tab again, which I think I still have open, let me just go like that. And now we'll go back to the non-incognito tab. Here we go. So now we're actually getting this message because it was a different socket that just connected, right? Any questions about that part? Tom?
I just have a question about the events. Like, in this particular case, the event was new user, correct?
Yeah.
And that's something that you just, it could have been anything, fun user, whatever. But are there certain things like, I guess, disconnect, were there events that are already predefined, or is that something else?
Well, yeah, there definitely are. I don't think you're going to run into problems with that for the most part, but if we look back over to disconnection, because really the only main things that are going to be pre-built are going to be the connection and disconnection events, I believe. Yeah, so as far as, like worrying about, I don't want to overwrite some functionality, those are the only things that I think you should be watching out for.
Okay, cool, thank you.
And also notice here that we can do a broadcast to a specific socket ID. Okay, so if we take a socket ID, remember earlier when I logged out the socket itself, there would be an ID inside that object. So if I want to send an object or some kind of event to a specific socket ID, I could just use this broadcast.to and then pass in the ID that I want to send that to. Yes.
On every refresh, it's a new ID though, right?
I believe that's correct. Yeah, because it's going to establish a new connection for you.
If you wanted to just have like an ID for that person, would you use like their ID or something?
Yeah, or maybe you could. Yeah, maybe you could assign it like a random ID that you're storing in some kind of array or some other data structure on the server, so that you're just keeping track of it. That might be useful if we're storing user names or something like that. We might have an array of usernames and then add or subtract to that depending on if it's a connection or a disconnection, something like that. All right, so that's basically the crux of what we're doing here is we're emitting events from both sides, and then each side needs to listen to those events as they happen, right? So we said that there are some different ways that we can connect with our sockets. We can broadcast to everything but that initial socket, or I can change this. If I want to broadcast to every single socket, I can just go io.emit new user. Okay, now let's see what happens. So if we go back here and we refresh this guy, wow, did a giant just land?
David's here?
David's here. Okay, so in this case, when I refresh the page, now it's saying a new user has joined because now I'm emitting to everyone, even including that specific socket. All right, and then if I go back to, the other one that's the non-incognito window, there we go. We're getting that message again because every single time a new user joins, that new user is also getting a message because I'm doing io.emit. Okay. What other kinds of communication can we have? So we did one thing. We emitted to everyone but that initial socket. We also emitted to everyone. What's the other one that we haven't done yet?
Make to one person.
Emit to one person, yeah. So we can easily emit to this specific socket using socket.emit, right? Or we could do socket.broadcast.id, or was it 2? I can't. It was like broadcast.2, right? Yeah. Syntax here. So yeah, socket.broadcast.2, and then we would pass it in the ID of the socket that we want to broadcast to. So I just want to practice. Let's send a message to that specific socket that just connected, right? So I'll go back in here, and then on this connection event, so I'll comment this out. So when we connect, let's just do socket.emit, and then I'm going to emit an event called welcome, and then I'll say you are number, and then we'll just say whatever count was, right? Exclamation point. Okay, so that's one side of the equation. What else do I need to do to handle this?
Client side.
Client side. Yep, so we just did server side, so I'll go back to my client side here. And now I'm going to listen for a welcome event. So we'll say socket.on welcome. And then again, I'm just going to console.log whatever came back with that welcome event. Okay, so if I go here and I refresh, I'm number 2. Okay, so let me actually close this guy. Oops. Go back to our main one. Do it here. So I'm number 1, so that's cool. I like that. Feels good to be number 1. All right, localhost 3000. You are number 2. and so on and so forth. So each new user is going to see like I am, like if this were a queue, is what position in line are you? Something like that, right? Queues, yeah, we could throw in like a singly linked list queue in there, right? If we were really masochistic, something like that.
Only 5 people are allowed in at a time.
Yeah, exactly. We could do some sort of blockages potentially, right? You're not allowed. You're out.
That'd be good
But-
for like a checkout queue.
Yeah, exactly. So there are a lot of different neat kind of implementations that you guys could probably play with sockets. There's some good assignments on the platform. I do want you guys to be aware, though, that they will not be on the exam. And, yeah, for better or worse. And I don't want people to get too stuck on, like, sockets in such a way that they kind of get behind on the other assignments. So it's one thing that it's really nice to experiment with, and then during project week, if you want to come back to it and maybe build something with sockets, that's a possibility as well. Just don't spend too much time on it. Yes, Tom.
Is there going to be something we're going to come across later in the stack that's kind of the equivalent to what Socket does, that kind of almost real-time connection, or are we
Nope.
not really going to see anything like that again?
No, that's it.
Okay, thank you.
That's it. But it's a pretty neat little thing. Hopefully you guys agree. Let's see. Yes, Alan?
If other stack can do socket too, like what's so special about the main socket?
Yeah.
Because the
Well,
platform talks about that a lot. The platform is like, oh, you guys like the main is so good, like because it has socket. So I assume like other platforms socket is.
So here's what couple things. One thing that's cool about the mean stack, just point blank, without even considering sockets, is just that we're working in JavaScript on both the front end and the back end. Okay, so that's a little bit different than in the other stacks. In the other stacks, you guys are really only working in the back end, unless you get to the Ajax portion and you play with that. The other thing that makes sockets work very well with Node is that Node is able to handle a very large number of requests at the same time. Okay, so depending on how simple or complex your server is, you could generally handle thousands of requests. Something like 15,000 requests, and not have your server be really bogged down. That wouldn't always be the case if you're working in some other language or framework. So I think maybe that's kind of what it's trying to emphasize in the platform, right? It's just the ability to handle all these requests quickly and disperse them and not get bogged down. That's all. But you're right. You could do them in other stacks, and that could be something else too if you guys want to experiment when you're doing project week. Let's see some thumbs on this. Where's your thumb, Harlan?
Still the same.
Ooh. Oh man, that hurts.
Don't worry.
Oh, look at this. Shreyas is firmly to the side.
That's just straight for him. It's like, oh, you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's gotta be tilted, right? All right, those of you who have sideways thumbs, what are the let's have some clarifications if there's something that wasn't clicking on this. Herman, you got any clarifications on it?
I think I just gotta do it.
That's fair. Yeah, I get that. Okay. Anything else, like anything that somebody didn't really follow during our session here? Yes.
What happens if you have like a socket and it's like the connection is cut suddenly in the middle of getting like a message?
Okay.
What happens to the message? Do you just get like half the message, or
I don't think it would come through at all, actually. If the connection was disrupted, I don't think it would. So if it was like on its way from the client to the server, you mean?
yeah?
Right? Yeah, it probably just wouldn't make it.
Oh.
So in like real practice, if we have like a login, right, and like we get the session ID,
Okay.
can we use that session ID to find out which user is passing messages through sockets?
Yeah, probably what you could do. So if we had logged in, let's look at our server code real quick.
They have their own ID.
Remind me of this later. Yeah, so as Alan pointed out, a socket is going to have its own ID, but inside your login logic, let's see what would you do. You'd probably end up setting it inside here. So inside the socket code, you would save whatever user ID that had been successfully logged in. So you might do the logging in through Ajax or something like that, and then maybe emit an event to the server, so that the server knows what the user ID is.
So I think the socket ID is kind of useless after it refreshes, and if you want to know that user still, that's what
Right, because then maybe you'd want to persist it.
the setters do there after refresh. It only disappears if you close your tab or browser.
No, I refresh it.
Yeah, but the ID is
Changes
changing, is
Yeah,
what
when
he's
you
saying.
refresh, it changes the socket.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Because every time there's a new page that's hit, you're actually creating that socket connection again.
But your original one is disconnected too.
Correct. Yeah, so the original connection goes away, and then you create a new one. Anything else?
Just to clarify that last bit, so like a socket ID, you can't use that to track a given user. Constantly change, say, navigate a site.
It kind of depends. I don't want to say you could never use it. Let's say you had an application that had client-side routing on it. So in other words, you weren't like hitting different routes in Express. You just maybe hit one route to begin with, and then everything after that was being routed just on the client side. You could probably do it that way too. Because at that point, a person's not refreshing the page. But keep in mind that they could refresh the page. So what you could do is maybe you could store something in the local storage of the browser. I mean, there are definitely ways to keep track of it. Yes, Tom?
Is Mongo on the exam?
Is what?
Mongo?
Yes.
Okay.
Sure is.
Just prioritizing.
Yeah, Mongo's big. Now you guys won't be using Mongo by itself. You'll be using it alongside Mongoose.
Okay.
Mongoose. It's a little bit ahead. That's like so. Mongoose will be 2 days from today. Mongo will be tomorrow.
Is there like a module called Mango?
I'm gonna stop this.